in the panel, and if we manage, I would like to take a few questions later if that's possible. So what's the topic we will be talking about? Basically, we are thinking about all the data we are having now and all the services and technology, and how can we shape this in a way that it serves the citizens in our respective cities coming from different backgrounds and different areas of the world. Now there's problems if you look into how to provide services. They are linked to how to collect the data, which data you have, with whom you want to share it, and how to communicate the information that you can collate from the data. To give you an example is, I am currently living in 3 towns. I call 3 towns my hometowns. One is Vienna in Austria, the other is Boston in the USA, and the last one is Manila in the Philippines. I'm working in all 3 of them, and I constantly have to go around the world, but also go around the cities. A major problem in going about the cities is how to get from A to B. And all 3 cities strive to help me with it, to work with me, to support me in my way from home to work or to play, and they do that for the diverse set of citizens. Now, however, all 3 cities go about this in a very different way, and all 3 of them face problems in a different way. Vienna has a superb real-time transport data information across all transport modes, even across the private cars with a floating car data service like you have in Berlin. However, for any one of you who visits Vienna and tries to look up his routing or the next public transportation on Google Maps, you will find absolutely no information about the public transport system, because the city of Vienna decided that it's not giving Google the data for free. However, they decided to develop their own comprehensive tailored transport app that includes all transport modes, include biking routes, include walking routes, including Scheidberging apps. However, as a citizen of this city, I know about it. What do I do as a tourist? Now, when I moved to Boston, the situation becomes a little more difficult. Boston, as a university town, has a lot of different public transport and private transport modes, but for an American city, it has a lot of buses, it has a metro line, so I actually can get around. They have some kind of data, but it's not as the quality, and the interlink between the different data collection modes doesn't work as perfectly as it works in other cities. However, they make it fully available on Google Maps, so it's easy for everybody to address, and they link with the big companies. The downside on this is that they do have some transport apps, but they are disconnected, and you have to address a different app if you want to take a bus or a metro line or any other of the services. Now, if I go on and move to Manila, we have a big problem because we have scarce transport data, and more than 60% of the people traveling through Manila use informal transport. You could also call it paralegal transport. It's a public transport system. Nevertheless, there is things going on, projects going on to at least put the informal transport routes into Google Maps, following an initiative by Sarah Williams, who did that in Nairobi with Matadus, to provide that data in a certain standard, GTFS standard, that can interact with Google Maps and put informal traffic on there. The downside on this is we have a few apps that inform us about the private-only car-based traffic, and they are provided by private companies. So this is just to span our discussion here and what the problems is and how we have to culturally tailor and interact in different cities. Without much further ado with this, Evgeny, thank you for the invitation again, and I'll hand over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to host this event. thank you for all the panelists to be the part of this session and to be just in time and precise in time as Katya advised to me. I will speak in Russian, so you have your presentation in English, and I hope you understand everything in my Russian in this English text. Добрый день, дамы и господа, меня зовут Козлов Евгений, и в Москве я отвечаю за...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Evgeny Kozlov. I work in Moscow. I work on the program Open Data and separate IT projects. Today, I would like to share with you the experience that Moscow has gained in the sphere that is called the cooperation between city and citizen. First and foremost, I'd like to ask you what megalopolis is for you. What does that mean for you? For the city administration is a challenge. For Moscow with 12 million people is a real challenge for any administrative worker. And we have to really understand what 12 million people demand from the city. What do they need? They need quite simple stuff. They need all the information. They need easy access to the information, and they need influence to the development of the city. And they need it right here, right now. They need it without any intermediaries. They need it easily and accessibly. And it's quite a bad challenge for the administration of the city. We have accepted that challenge, and let's see what the mayor's team has done as a response. They had offered instruments of cooperation between the city and the citizens. These instruments, they really address all the basic group of needs that citizens have. First is to know about the city. We created this open data project. Second, receive urban services online and offline. For that, we created the city services portal, and we created a network of 122 offices where every citizen can get any service in a very comfortable way. The third way, the influence to the urban development. Firstly, contributing their ideas through the crowdsourcing city platform. We also have an instrument of e-referendums. These are web portals that are opened for online service among citizens, where people can vote for pro and contra some city initiatives. And another thing that I would like to tell you more in details about the feedback system, so-called feedback system, where we receive that feedback about the problems that sometimes happen in the city. I believe you heard about 311 system in LA, in New York. I believe you heard about Citizens Connect, when the system that gives a citizen a chance to leave a feedback about something. Quite similar, but with differences. We've opened that portal 5 years ago, and we have there more than 300,000 registered users. What is the difference? The portal itself as a product or as a mobile app can receive some suggestions from citizens. This is transparent and can be seen by anyone. The response that citizens get is also transparent and can be accessed by anyone. Moreover, the administrative worker is personally responsible for the solution of the problem. Another feature is that not only the response, but the problem that is registered on the portal is to be solved within the period of 8 days, and we are striving to make it 4 days. And this project has moved from online to offline. Right now we have volunteers helping this project. These volunteers help to prove whether this problem has really been solved or not, and it has to be returned to some correction. And with that, the user that has addressed with this problem initially has a right to say, yes, this problem has been solved, or no, they are cheating, they hadn't done anything, and there's still a lot to do. This is a great way for a city to address any problem possible. I have a beautiful slide that demonstrates the history of the development of this project, but I will skip it. A couple of words more about the realization of every urban project. For the present moment, we have a separate open data portal and all the offices of the urban services. And we're very proud that with the fact that more than 80 million applications are made on the web portal of the administration of Moscow. These beautiful diagrams demonstrate you the real efficiency of these services. You see 6 branded services, but we believe we have to create a unique umbrella that will unify all of them. Right now, we are developing the concept of one-stop shop, one website, one portal for all the city services. We want you to think that the city has one entrance point, most.ru. We just recently have had a brilliant commercial that Moscow is very accessible. It's just one step away from you, just one click away from you. From the ideological point of view, I really love this idea. The city has to be open to you. It has to be in one step distance, in one click distance, or one phone call distance from you. So everything that we're doing now, we are trying to use every communication way possible. We try to use everything, like online, offline, offices, or the portal of state services. We believe that with this, we address all the communication that the citizen needs, that the citizens have, like to have information, to contribute, to influence, to access the data. If you have any idea, if you have gone through different path, right? If you have different experience, different successes or failures, it will be an honor to hear from you and to learn from your experience. Thank you very much. I hope I am in time.
Thank you. In our discussion before is how open you were to having an improvised discussion and see the different perspectives from other cities. So I would like to invite Anthony Townsend. He's the Director of Technological Development at the Institute of Future, the Future, to comment on Evgeny's talk a bit. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I have to leave to join the transport. Across the street. I just wanted to raise one question for the remainder of the discussion. You're clearly doing a tremendous amount, along with your sister cities around the world, to use these technologies to start to engage and empower citizens to interact with government, make their voices heard. And that's really, the question with all these technologies is what's the right level of engagement and empowerment for your city? And that answer is different in different cities, in different cultures, in different national contexts. So I won't presume to say I know the right answer for Moscow or for Russia. That's for you to decide. But there are lots of possibilities, right? And it opens up lots of risks, but also lots of opportunities, because you have these 22 million people who have all these talents and all of this knowledge, and who can contribute to making the city a better place if you tap them in a way that allows them to contribute. So I think of it in the simplest terms as you can listen, which you're starting to do. Other people talk about using these tools to allow citizens to co-create the city. You're also starting to do that. And some of the visions of what the future might look like is actually, empowering people to start delivering some of the services that we look to government to provide. So crowdfunding and crowdsourcing services and things like that. So it's a really exciting future, and there's a lot of opportunity. And it's interesting just to think about, where are you now? Where can the technology take you? And where do you want to end up in 5 years or 10 years? And what do you need to do today to get to where you might want to be? So I applaud what you're doing, and hope you keep pushing yourself to keep going further.
Thank you, Anthony. And I guess you have to rush over to the other side of the street, as you nicely put it, in our City of the Urban Forum. Evgeny, do you want to quickly answer Anthony's raised points?
I hope to have not a quick answer, but a really good conversation this evening and tomorrow. Thank you for participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. With this, I would like to hand over to Vladimir Verkhoshinsky, who will give a short presentation. He's a member of the board of VTB Bank, and he will show us what they are doing to help the citizens. Thank you.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Vladimir Verkhoshinsky, and I am responsible for retail business of VTB Bank. Today, the mayor, Mr. Sabanian, will make a presentation. And he made a presentation. He talked about technologies and about mega projects. Let me start with technology, and then I will shift to those mega projects. Could you please show the presentation on the screen? Today, Moscow is a city labyrinth. Not only a labyrinth for tourists, but for us, for Muscovites as well. A labyrinth in terms of events, transportation. It's very hard to find your way, and we rely more and more on the internet and new technologies for that. When we think about the internet, often we think about PC, about having internet access through it, but we use more and more our smartphones. In 2010, your keys, your phone, and your wallet. But ladies, they have more things in their bags, in their purses. But, well, that was the basic set of things. But by 2020, I will not be surprised if people will only have their smartphone with them and nothing else, and it will solve every possible need that we might have. On the one hand, this internet environment is being filled by commercial operators, aggregators like taxi. 80% of taxis are ordered via internet, via smartphones. 50% of hotels via smartphones in Moscow. There are other services about traffic situation, parking lots. It is also quite interesting that online helps to move to foster the offline environment development, because in the banks, for example, bank had to have a decentralized network to talk with clients, or the city would talk this way to the citizens. But when we move the technology forward, we can use more and more centralize the offline infrastructure, because more and more things are done online. For example, multifunctional centers are growing. Just think about it. 98% of contacts with the citizens with the government, with the administration are done via internet. I use myself those services, and this is very convenient. I'll skip a couple of slides, and now I will be talking not about the technology, but the mega projects. Anthony, on his first presentation today, said that working with data is the prerogative of the private sector. But I think otherwise. The volume of data is growing drastically. For what we buy, where we go, what we want, what we don't want, but not a single commercial structure will be capable of aggregating all these data. And in this way, I see the role of the administration, of the government. They might be the integrator of this big data. And the mega project is not only about accumulating, aggregating this data, but about making it relevant, making it useful for the residents of the city. And I think the next step is to add extra analytics and intelligence to this content that fills our internet environment. And I think that the city administration might be this central brain, mega brain, that will be able to forecast what we want and what we need. Only imagine that. I have a foreign passport, I mean the Russian passport for traveling abroad. And only imagine in 5 years, when my passport is about to expire, I will have a memo and I will be able to make a photo with the camera of my own smartphone, also with the print of my thumb, send this data and then get my new passport with a courier. So that would be great, wouldn't it? I think this is where the future lies. The future lies where the cities are aggregators of data, and the initiatives that the Moscow city is implementing, I think they hold a large promise, and we as a commercial structure are very eager to participate and to support those kinds of initiatives.
For this, I would like to hand over to Klaus Wowereit. He was the mayor of Berlin, and he's famous of opening it up and including more and more social infrastructures and interacting with the people and providing them the services they want. However, I guess I'm probably expecting that you have a very individual look on the connection of cities majorly and only through the internet or through apps. Maybe you can follow up with your views on a data service in the city for your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to the Urban Forum, and I'm very proud to be here in our sister city. Moscow and Berlin are sister cities since decades, and I hope that we will have a lot of projects to work together in the field of culture or sports or administration and to develop our cities. Congratulations to the development of Moscow in the last years. You can see it, you can feel it, and it's a wonderful atmosphere. To change an administration, that is impossible. You need a revolution. It is not with evolution to do. You have to need a real revolution. Everyone is talking about data, everyone is talking about IT. That's easy to say all the visions, what you want to have in 5 years with your passport. The reality today, it's quite different. If I want to have a passport in community office in Berlin, then the first problem is to get an appointment. You can fix it by internet, but you have not a free day for the appointment. Next is in September. If you are calling in August, then the next is in November, and so on and so on. So that is the quality of IT technology today in the administrations, and I think Berlin is not at the end of the row. And on the other side, it's easier to implement new systems like in Riga or in Tallinn in small communities or in countries like Finland as you do it in Russia or in Moscow or in Berlin and in Germany. That's quite easier sometimes. We have administration that is a central government is the Senate of Berlin, and then we have 12 districts. With inhabitants of 300,000 inhabitants, and therefore the responsibility for the community offices are in the districts. And then you have the problem, what the government of Berlin decided is not the reality in the district. So, and therefore they say we need more people to organize it, the offices, and that is one problem. How you can deal it, that the services what the people of the city want to have from the organization and from the administration to manage it. It can't be a great problem, but it is in reality, it is a problem. And what do you need from the administration in your life? You're not every day at the city hall to say, I need your support by administration. That is often a question of the passport, for example, or a license for cars or for other things, or a building permit, but that once in your life, or every 10 years with a passport, and that is to organize. The other big point is what we mentioned, that you are coming as a tourist in a city, and then you need a good data material that you have the chance to be independent as a foreigner in the city and to find the hotels, the restaurants, the traffic connections, and so on. That is systems that you can build up. And then you have the libraries, for example. They need other circumstances. Then you have the theaters with the ticket service and so on. And the goal is to make a network from all the data systems where are mostly separated and to bring them together. And then with systems with a good hard and software, and to develop this software that it is easy to manage and implement in a not easy to handle administration. That is the goal for the future. And all the authorities who are responsible for that, good luck on this way. I think we need a little bit more than 5 years.
But I must say that this service I mentioned before, my documents, is already at that high level in terms of centralization, user experience, etc., etc. And this is the question to Evgeny, how they managed to do this.
Thanks for the mayor, for the God, and for the miracle.
Thank you, and thank you for us not being out of jobs for a very long time, I guess. So I would like to hand over to Dietmar Offenhuber. He's a professor at Northeastern University, and I think he has something to say from the perspective of like the perfect, slick infrastructures that we are envisioning and how it might look a little bit more down on the ground. Could you bring on his presentation, please?
So no slides. Oh, no. That's the wrong one.
Usman. That's Usman's. Do you have Dietmar's? I'll give you that for a moment.
Actually, I don't need slides. It's
Okay,
fine.
thanks, Dietmar.
So, I wanted to, talking about urban services, I wanted to take a brief step back and talk about, the basic question, what is an urban problem that we want to solve, and how can we address it? And both of these answers to these questions cannot really be taken for granted because they often get resolved in a almost like a conversation between citizens and city officials. Thank you. And this conversation often involves a certain extent of improvisation. So we cannot often articulate exactly what needs to be fixed and how to fix it. So this is an example from Manila, from a project with Katja, where improvisation plays a very central role in urban maintenance. So we see this kind of fancy new lamp that unfortunately doesn't work. So someone pulled out the wire and attached it to a different lamp that now works. So this kind of improvisation is not necessarily on the citizen side or on the administration side. It is both. It's a kind of like jazz, call and response. And of course, this might seem like an extreme example, but if we look at the last 7-8 years of the kind of citizen feedback systems history in the United States, it's happened actually very similar. So, not only from the technical side, where a lot of hackathons and trial and error iterations were necessary to come up with a kind of a model that works, but also from the user side. Here we just see a couple of topics that people submitted in the other general category when they didn't know exactly what they wanted. And this kind of formation of categories is a very crucial step, because I think in no system we can really take all these things for granted. We have to provide some level of improvisation and make it possible to, keep this a lively system. And it's also a couple of years ago, we spoke a lot about the city as a platform where you have a unified access to everything. Now we actually talk about multiple platforms because things get complicated and complex, something that Benjamin Bratton calls the stack in a slightly different context. But this kind of multiplicity of interdependent platform layers have the advantage that we can provide very personalized access to different people. The same interface doesn't work for everyone. But it also creates a challenge that governance becomes something of a design problem. We have to somehow figure out, how to give a form to all those kind of, technical infrastructure. Maybe we don't need Twitter anymore in 3 years. Who knows? There are all these kind of different platforms that might at some point play a very central role, but then not so much in the future. So. I think design is a very central question in how to design these services, especially when we think about that a lot of new items, sensors and objects become smart in the city, and all those things collect data from people passing by, and this creates not only questions of privacy but also questions of data governance, because there are many companies, many actors are involved in managing the data. What happens to it? How is it? What's the life cycle? So we have a need for data governance, but at the same time, for the person who is in public space, none of that is visible. So what I call accountability-oriented design would be a way to integrate some of these issues into actually the design of public space, that calling attention to issues of governance, provide relevant information where it is needed. This is, I think, something that we need to think about more in the future.
Thank you very much, Dietmar. Ilya, might I invite you to answer to this? You are famous for documenting, influencing, and the style and the expression of Moskowitz. And what do you think from this perspective that would help us?
Я думаю, что на самом
What I think is we know how city services should work, and we've known it for a while. And there still is a great work ahead of us, but we know what it is that we want on the level of interfaces. We understand that it should look nice, not worse than the commercial structures. It should be convenient, rely on big data. Well, it's very hard to change regulations and fight bureaucracy for it to happen. But from what I know, from the design, on the design level, I don't see a great challenge here. We can do it greatly. And should I join the compliments on my documents, because I think this is a extremely phenomenal thing. We have a benchmark like that. Should we? And I think we should have everything on the level of my documents service, my documents portal. It's not that much of a problem. Another task is to change the framework and the perspective that we think in, and not only talk about the city services as something that the city authorities provide to us, but to start talking about the services that we use in the city. And this will lead us to a very interesting discussion. Because right now, there is this terrible thing, this government that is trying to be less terrifying and trying to look nicer. And, we can knock on the door, say, something doesn't work, or I need this paper or that. And if they have a good design, they will, be friendly and do what we want. But if not, this will take a long time. It will be very inconvenient. But in fact, we could imagine a more open, a more interactive system. For example, Facebook teaches us that we can generate content ourselves, consume it ourselves, and this is extremely interesting. The city has a great resource. People who live there have a bigger resources even. But the question is whether it is possible to integrate it on the level of a platform where these things could interact with each other. And to shift from theory to reality, let me give you an example. In my courtyard, maybe there will be a sandbox. This is a decision of the city authority, and I know where to buy the best sandbox. I can give you money, there are lots of children, families with children in my building. They do have money, and we want to, add money. We want to fund the sandbox, a better one. But the city doesn't allow me to do that. The city doesn't engage me in these kind of decisions, in projecting and designing this small plot of land that I live in and that has a direct connection with me. But there are a lot of people like I and others, and some don't have extra money, but they could help dig out the hole for this sandbox. The interesting thing is that these modular, granular decisions maybe should also engage the people, and thus the residents will feel more empowered, feel more engaged and motivated, because life is more interesting if I can paint the walls in my building in the color that I choose, that I want. That will be my decision. That is not the same that is done by projects by my city, because this is about ideas. I'm not talking about ideas, but about direct participation in what happens, in what goes on. And this is the next frontier. This is about thinking differently. If we move in this direction, we will be talking about, direct democracy. This is a tiny example of this kind of direct democracy, but, recent events in England show that this is a difficult topic, I mean direct democracy, and we will get there after a while, but let us practice, with toys and then move to to real things.
So with this, I would like to hand over to a perspective from probably first Murmansk and then moving on to Moscow. I'd like to introduce Stefan Mitaki, the co-founder of the service MyCity.io, and I would like to have your perspective on how to design those services. Thank you.
Thank you. First, it's an honor to be in here, and thank you, Evgeny, for your presentation. As someone who lives in Moscow, I really love what you're doing, and I actually use it on a daily basis and stuff like this. And I've been following the progress of Moscow in terms of digital and internet online services for quite a long time. And we are building a platform for allowing residents to influence the development of their cities. It's a citizen engagement platform. And my perspective mostly comes from influencing people and allowing them to have their say in the decision making in the city. And for instance, in the city of Tromsø, using our platform, the municipality added about 30 ideas into their official master plan for the next 20 years, just based on ideas that were sent from regular farmers, bankers, whatever, regular citizens. And at some point we realized the next challenge that municipalities and cities are facing in services that comes from influence. So, for instance, in Moscow there are the crowdsourcing platform and an active citizen platform, but at some point we realized a challenge that comes from communication. To what degree can you actually allow citizens to participate in the decision making, and how can you communicate the pros and cons of which of this or that decision? And the biggest example of this comes from recent news about Britain and Brexit, where regular people not always know about all pros and all cons, and they have to be communicated and educated at some point. And this also touches upon all the services that where you allow users to influence this decision making in a city development. To what degree can you actually allow them to make decisions about the city, and how can you communicate all the different and all the smallest details about each specific thing they can participate in? And at some point we realized this is actually might be like for us it might be an additional value for our customers, because some of their cities, they actually communicate those pros and cons. So for instance, in a crowdsourcing, if someone is raising an idea, hey, let's build a park in here, the building of a park is not the biggest value for the users, but communicating why you cannot build the park and building a better image of the city, because they are communicating with each other like regular people, it's the biggest value. For instance, but at least for this time, for starters, and yeah, but we don't have this solution, and I don't think any of us have, but it's an interesting challenge, and I think we'll be able to solve it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stepan. So now Usman Hark, founding partner from Umbrellum, I would like to invite you to give your perspective. I know you as someone who can inspire, engage, and actually make people happy with your projects. So let's see how your perspective on engaging and working with the citizens is.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to be quite quick because we're right at the end. Just echoing some of the things that people have talked about, I think it's great that you now have the technology layer. That's the first step, in a sense. You've got a bunch of things that are actually catering to requirements of the citizens. I want to talk about the next step, and that is deeper participation. Because when you get truly innovative, you actually get to the point where it's the most risky, right? That is when the risk of failure actually is an important part of the kind of innovative process. And that actually requires scripting or re-scripting the relationship of government to citizens. Because up until now, historically, you know, government kind of gives, and then citizens complain, and then government gives something slightly different, and people complain a bit more, and then slowly over time you get somewhere. And you don't actually, a government is not allowed to fail. But in a truly innovative context, you actually need to re-script the way that kind of work is done, because you might fail. Now, by getting more people involved into the process, that in itself is incredibly risky, because in a truly participatory system, you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. And so in many senses, governments are reluctant to get people involved in a meaningful way, because it might fail and you might end up with, you know, an upside down park with, you know, painted red everywhere, because that's what people, or a boat called Bodie McBoatface, or Brexit, or what have you. And so I think this is one of the fundamental challenges. But the thing I want to say is that with risk and participation that leads to innovation, what you actually get is people with a concrete sense of ownership in the outcomes. And even if, as you were pointing out, even if the park doesn't materialize, just having that conversation, being open to that sense of risk, and open to that kind of sense that their contribution, not just a drop-down menu and not just a kind of a tick box, but their conversation, their deliberation, and their decision-making, that is actually, all of these things go hand in hand. Risk, innovation, participation, and ownership in the outcomes. And just to give two quick examples of some work that I do, I basically work with cities on technology and infrastructure and community development issues. I have no idea where I paint this. One of these projects was, I just lost the slide. Maybe you could just show that video. I was commissioned by the city of Bradford to be a lighting designer for the city center. And I actually said why don't we do an operating system for all of the sensors and lights and fountains and weather stations and urban furniture, and let citizens script the lighting and the way that the lighting responds to them. Can you play that first video? And what happened was that actually it's people that own the city, that live in the city, not me as a kind of an outsider, that design the way that the city responds to them, designed through this operating system. We're not going to see any video, but basically, there you go. You know, they can configure the way the fountains respond to them, or the lights, or plug in the weather station into the mist making machine. When the local team scores a goal, they can have the fountains all erupt at the same time, etc., etc. So this was a process of actually it was a risky one, because the city said, "Wait, what happens if people do really crappy designs?" And actually, you know what? Maybe 50% of the designs are crappy, but people actually love the space because they feel it's theirs. The second project I just want to mention, can you go to the second video, was called Flight Path Toronto. And this was in Toronto in Canada, a project with Natalie Jeremijenko, where we wanted to look at public transport in a truly innovative way, one that actually involved people in the process of deciding what, how, where, and where they would go. And so what we ended up doing was basically creating zip lines across the city center. Zip lines that are traditionally used in mountain ranges. They're fast, they're fun, they have a very low carbon footprint, and most importantly, people can get involved in planning out the routes, deploying them, and when they get it wrong, it's very easy to change. So you get you get people actually involved in these kind of transportation decisions that are not just about, is it a bike lane or is it a bus route, which ends up being a 10-year consultation process and then 15 years of mess in downtown cities, and actually get them to understand the complexity of these things. And I think that is, just to reiterate, you get this kind of innovation only when you're risky, but it's through that risk that you actually get people's sense of agency and involvement and kind of a deep sense of responsibility actually for their own cities. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, Evgeny, I hope we fulfilled with our different perspectives on how to handle the more rational, mundane, day-to-day interactions in cities and how they interact with the administrations, but also on how to create engagement and how to address each and us, every one of us, on an emotional level, on a level that's fun and a little bit more risky, but give us a special feeling when we connect with our cities. So, would you like to
summarize? Thank you all. One thing I can just say at the finish, we should do more art, more performance, more like this. We are more functional rather than funny. We might be not so risky as we might be, but we might be not so engaging that Ilya mentioned to allow people to invest money in our city infrastructure. We will think about that. And thank you for your ideas. We will do that for sure. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for coming, and for the panel that had artists and designers, media experts and improvising people, the same as services and bankers. I am part-time a banker too, so we are important. And thank you everybody, and have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the forum. Thanks.